Welcome to A Fine Time, The Nanny Revisited. This is a podcast about The Nanny, where we recap each episode and then discuss, sharing our own unique take on each episode. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Debbie. Since we finished season 4 last time, today we're taking a short break from our episode by episode discussion. Instead, we'll be discussing season 4 more holistically. Season 4 of The Nanny started with disappointment. After Maxwell told Fran he loved her at the end of season 3, he took it back as soon as they were back on terra firma, forcing Fran back into the dating pool, much to her displeasure. When Maxwell's baby brother Nigel came for an impromptu visit, he asked Fran to marry him, and she nearly accepted his offer, unbeknownst to anyone else. After she nearly ended up marrying her cousin, Maxwell sends her to therapy to try to get her to stop focusing on her desire for a relationship. Even so, they flirt and, at points, come close to physically consummating their undefined relationship. Fran follows him to London to try to recapture the passion they had in Paris, only to be thwarted by his conception of himself as a bloody gentleman. That's it for her. She can't take it anymore, but she ends up sticking around because Niles had a heart attack. At Niles' bedside, Fran and Maxwell give in to their urges to live life to the fullest, which is where season 4 ends. Meanwhile, Maggie has been accepted to Columbia, Brighton nearly fails science, and Gracie worries about everything changing irrevocably. Bernadette, do you have anything you want to add?
Ooh, I guess just a little bit with Cece and Niles.
Yes, fair. We do get glimpses of some changes to their relationship.
Yes, especially when Niles has his heart attack,
Correct.
but also
When Cece
earlier.
had her boyfriend.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you for that summary of season 4.
You're very welcome. So, is there anything you want to talk about? Like, I guess let's start with some high points, then some low points.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's interesting because I know I'm probably jumping ahead, but I realized in looking at our like ratings for this season,
Hmm.
I had no fives.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, I had like the highest I gave any episode was a 4.75.
Wow.
Mhm.
Interesting. Um,
Yeah, and it
so,
wasn't like a conscientious decision,
mhm.
but yeah.
So I guess we'd say for you, the 4.75s were the high points.
Mhm.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
okay.
Well, and so I guess like when we talk about the high points, I guess let's see where we kind of agreed. Because what's interesting is there are a couple of times where I gave it a higher score than you, and then vice versa.
Correct.
But there were a couple where you gave it a 5 and I gave it a 4.75. So I
Right.
think we could agree those are probably like our combined like high points of this season.
So I think we're talking about the episode The Nose Knows. That's the one
Mhm.
where uh Fran's therapist is seen in public picking his nose and all the mishigas that follows. The bank
Mhm.
robbery where Fran and Sylvia end up being held hostage at a bank
Mhm.
on Valentine's Day.
Yep.
Um, and then I think those are the only two that
Yeah. Well,
that definition. We did at the end of
we
the
both
season.
had Fran's Gotta Have It was both of us 4.75. So I'll
Correct.
add that in there. But yeah.
And that's the end of the season. Obviously, that's where Fran followed him to London, which was a lot of my
Mhm.
summary
Yeah.
for the season.
Yep. Yeah. So I think those like that those are our collective high points, I guess, of this
Correct.
season.
Correct.
So would you mind reminding us what happened in like I'm trying to remember. The nose knows, like you said, the Dr. Miller
Yep.
was Fran saw him like picking his nose in public. But what else happened in that episode?
So I mean, that was the main thing. So she sees him picking his nose in public, and this is after she's like been talking him up, saying he's so brilliant, he's the best shrink since Freud, et cetera, et cetera. And then she sees that and she tells her mom and she canceled her therapy session. And Sylvia tells Maxwell that Fran didn't go to therapy because let's just say the doctor put his hand somewhere he
Uh-uh.
shouldn't have.
Oh, yeah. And, like, Maxwell got protective.
Correct. And Fran confronted Dr. Miller, uh, and Maxwell went with her, but he didn't go into the session with her. And then Fran comes out and she's, repulsed by it. And he like goes in to like, yell at and threaten Dr. Miller, like you should be ashamed of yourself, taking advantage of poor, you know, helpless patients. And Dr. Miller's like, that's Dr. Pepkin. And he's like, I'm looking for the guy who, takes advantage of people, blah, blah, blah. And yeah, that's Dr. Pepkin. And Max was like getting ready to punch this guy out when he then finds out that, oh, he picked his nose in public.
Mhm.
Because, like, also, not only did Sylvia tell Maxwell, like, he put his hand somewhere he shouldn't have, Maxwell talked to Fran about it, and Fran's like, all men have urges. If I think Sylvia is the one who said, like, if this was a crime, you'd have to arrest every man on the subway, things like that.
Mhm. Yeah. Yep. And then the bank robbery obviously is when, both Fran and Sylvia are in the bank as a very incompetent
Yes, Leslie Tilden.
bank robber, takes them hostage,
Yeah,
and
he forgot to spray paint to bring spray paint for the security cameras. He wore the wrong mask, so it did not cover his face. He tells people his true name.
mhm,
It turns out he was driven to do it by his mother. He needs to get her out of his life, and so Fran gives him her bracelet. Take it with my blessing. And of course,
mhm,
he's even more incompetent because he uses Fran and Sylvia as like human shields, and then he kidnaps Sylvia as a hostage to get to the airport, and he follows her incorrect directions and gets apprehended at the was it Mongolian barbecue.
mhm, and of course, this is another instance in which, like, Maxwell shows up worried
Right, but
outside.
don't forget that this was Valentine's Day, and so he got Fran a card. Um, and the joke, I don't remember the beginning of it. Oh, what rhymes with Cupid? Like it opened up.
And then the
Here's
mirror. Yeah.
yeah, here's something like here's looking at you, stupid, or whatever.
Yeah.
And so it hurt her feelings. Um,
Mhm,
and so he was feeling guilty, like that could have been the last thing she ever heard from him. Um,
mhm.
yeah,
Yeah, and, like, I think he tries to call and talk to her,
he
and she's
does, and
like mhm,
he talks to the bank robber, who Brand's like, tell him I'm not here. I don't want to talk
mhm,
to him, like things like that. And actually, if you recall, the way as the bank robber is walking Fran out, he has his arm around her neck, and Maxwell's calling to her, or whatever, and she says, "I just think it's sad that my abductor and I are closer than you and I will ever be." And so then he takes the like police microphone or whatever megaphone, and he's like, "I'm not sorry. I oh no, that's a different one." Anyway, sorry, I'm getting my things confused, but I think he also says that he's not sorry. He told her that he loved her
mhm,
or something like that. And Leslie's like, "Oh, she doesn't want to hear it." And Fran elbows him, "Good nug already." "Oh, Mr. Sheffield." And
mhm.
she runs over to him and they hug. And anyway,
Yeah,
how about some
yeah.
low points? Should we talk about some of the low points this season?
Yeah, so the lowest low point based off of, like, our mutual, like, scoring would be, we France Roots, you gave it
Yep.
a 2, I gave it a 2.5.
So that's the episode where Fran gets a call. Apparently, a nurse mixed up some birth records around the time she was born, and the woman calling could be Fran's true mother. And then it turns
Mhm,
out that the woman is black. Um, and so Fran gets invited to her home, meets her kids, and then they find out, oh no, she's not. She's not her mother. Meanwhile, Sylvia is very upset by this. Finds out the woman's black and is like, "This is crazy." Then finds out how rich the woman is, and it's like, this is your mom. Like, stop calling me mom. Like, it's yeah, it's awkward and
mhm,
weird. And of course, there's a whole joke about how Maxwell can't keep his hands off her now that she's getting a different mother.
mm, mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. We also have a couple of episodes where either you or I gave it a 3 and the other person gave it a 2.5. So the first one being the Cradle Robbers.
So that's the second episode of this season. That's the one where Maggie, who I believe is like 16 or 17, is dating a 25-year-old guy, and Fran is dating his 25-year-old friend.
Mhm.
Um, it was not
Everybody knows
ideal.
my opinion on this.
Yeah, it was not ideal. Um,
Uh-huh.
and Maxwell, the other plot in this episode is Maxwell has some short-term hearing loss, and everyone's playing up the fact that he can't hear. So like Maxwell, all he wants to hear is that Maggie's going to break up with this guy. And Fran's like, well, fine, that's exactly what you're going to hear. She walks to the other side of him, and she basically recites the lyrics to the Flipper song.
Mhm.
And then she walks back, and then she'll dump him. And so Maxwell goes along with the plan, but is then very upset when he finds out that Maggie's going out on another date with this guy and that Fran's going out with his friend. Of
Mhm.
course, Maggie does show some maturity and breaks up with this guy on her own because they have nothing in common because he's an adult, she's a child.
Mhm.
There is a cute moment where Maggie's like, "But I have everything in common with you," she says to Fran, and Fran's like, "Well, yeah, that's because I'm stunted." Like
Mhm.
that's why we get along. Like and
Yeah.
and and Maggie then says like something along the lines of I love you as if you were my mom or something like that. Like,
Mhm.
oh,
Yeah.
that she's sorry that she said you weren't my real mother. That's what she
Mhm.
says.
Yeah, because that
Um,
was one of the things she lashed out with.
correct.
Yeah. And then opposite is the tax man cometh, where you gave it a 2.5, I gave it a 3.
Yeah, so this is the one where Fran gets audited for tax
Mhm.
violations, declaring multiple dependents: Donna, Karen, Ralph, Lauren,
Mhm.
Haagen-Dazs, her adopted foreign child. Um, and so she gets audited, and the auditor comes and she tries to flirt her way out of it. It doesn't get her anywhere, even though the guy was apparently attracted to her anyway. Um,
Mhm.
so they go to the like appeals office, and Max was trying to help her out, and he like pulls strings to get Jay Leno to show up, and ends up getting the case dismissed. So Jay Leno was a guest star on that episode, and the subplot was Fran was dog sitting for Jay Leno's dog, who ended up pregnant at the end of it.
Mm.
Um,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah.
not great.
Mm-mm. Yeah, I was also kind of like scanning through, and it's interesting because we have a couple where like we're like a point and a half away from each other.
Yeah, so like the first episode in the season, the tart with heart. You gave it a four and
Mhm.
a half. I gave it a three. And
Mhm.
so this is the episode at the very beginning of season three. Fran and Maxwell get off the plane, and before they even get in the house, he wants to talk about what he said up there in that space. And he's like, "Don't you know how it is to like you might blurt something when you think you're about to die?" She's like, "No." Anyway, ultimately she realizes he blurted prematurely, and he takes back the thing, which is him saying he loved her.
Mhm.
And then Fran ends up going out with Jack the lawyer, who's the Jack the blind lawyer. Um, basically, and he realizes that she's seeing him to prove to herself that she's more than just a pretty face.
Mhm.
I gave it a three because I can't get over Maxwell being so like stunted and manipulative that he took back saying he loved her. Um, but
Mhm.
that's just me.
And I gave it a 4.5 because like I was expecting that to happen even though I hadn't seen that episode before, but just in like the knowing that there's 6 seasons
Yeah.
and we were, timing wise, I was like, okay. Um, but yeah, then we have the opposite, where an affair to dismember. You gave it a 5. I gave it a 3.5.
So this is the episode where Maxwell's baby brother Nigel shows up in New York unexpectedly, and Maxwell's busy at work, so he basically pawns his brother off on Fran, who they kind of have a thing for each other. You know, they go dancing. He asks her to he gives her sorry before he even asks her to marry him, he gives her a diamond solitaire and asks her to go back to England with him. And she's like, "Oh, I'm not that kind of girl." And he's like, "I'm asking you to be my wife." And she's like, "Oh, I am that kind of girl. I am that kind of girl." And like she
Mhm.
can't make up her mind whether she wants to put all her chips on Maxwell or try with the brother. And
Mhm.
he gives her a ticket for the QE2 and says, you know, I'll be waiting at the dock. If you don't come, I'll know your answer was no. And
Mhm.
she packs and she races there, but she can't get there on time. And then she gets back to the house and she'd already written like a resignation letter, a note to Maxwell. She had left it in his office. She goes back to the house and she's sitting on the couch crying and he comes home and she realizes he hasn't been home yet. So like he asks her if she's been crying. She says, I went out clubbing with Belle and I twisted my ankle. He goes and gets her ice. She runs to his office, grabs the note, stuffs it down her shirt. Um, and then he asks her why she's breathing so heavily. And she's like, Lamaze. Yeah, Ma enrolled me, wishful thinking. But like
Mhm.
there's this moment where like she's clearly distraught. Like everything she wanted was basically within arm's reach, and she blew her chance. And then Maxwell comes in, and it ends with him picking her up and carrying her up the stairs. And he says, "Oh, I've got you, Miss Fine." And she says, "Boy, do you ever."
Mhm. And like I believe like one of the main reasons I gave it a 3.5 is because I didn't really feel any chemistry with Fran and the brother. Um
Mm-hmm.
like I didn't like it wasn't really believable to me. It all seemed very quick.
Oh, it
Uh
definitely was very quick. Yes, I
and like
agree.
yeah, and so like that kind of like I guess took me out of it. But it's funny cuz kind of jumping ahead, and we can circle back if you want to talk more about this, but I may subconsciously have realized because the other episode that you gave a 5 and I gave a 3.5 was Kissing Cousins.
Mm.
And I'm like, okay, maybe in episodes where there's talk of her marrying someone else, I'm just like, nope.
Yeah, no, and that's fair. I mean, I think we're both team Maxwell, or
Uh,
we're shipping Fran and Maxwell.
yeah.
Um, I don't let that get in my way of liking an episode, though.
Yeah. No, and I think it's like subconscious. Like, oh, nope.
Maybe.
Or again, like because in Kissing Cousins, this is the one where Jon Stewart was actually the
Mm-hmm.
guest. And as the title implies, I think the other thing too is just like logistically, like would you really find out that you're both in the same uh
No,
bridal party as you're walking down the aisle?
no, exactly. There would have been a rehearsal first.
Exactly. But anyway, Jon Stewart plays this doctor, like
Cousin Bob.
basically like the perfect person for Fran, but then it turns out they're cousins. Um,
Mm-hmm.
when Sylvia announces it loud.
Oh, let me get a picture of you and your cousin Bob.
Yeah, yeah. Awkward.
Yeah.
Um,
Which is
but
also
yeah.
really sad because like Fran announced, like, after her first date with this guy, she announced to the Sheffield family that she says to her mom who's there, I found the man I'm gonna marry.
Mhm.
And then it turns out he's her cousin.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm glad they found that out earlier, like sooner rather than later, right? Although we
True.
can't really tell how soon it was. Yeah, anyway.
True.
Um, but
True.
yeah, I just think that's a funny thing looking at the data right now, just how those 2 episodes, 5 and 3.5, and it both had some type of like her saying she's gonna marry this person.
That is interesting. And for the record, I can't remember which episode it is, but I know Fran makes a comment to Val about like how it's been like 5 years since she's had sex. So I just can't remember if that's
Okay.
before or after this episode. But my guess
Okay.
is it was after. So like we don't
Okay.
have to worry too
You don't
much.
have to worry about that. Okay.
If that makes you feel any better at all, I
Yes,
think
it
it's
kinda
after.
does.
Okay. Okay. On the bright side, even if they did, they clearly didn't. She didn't get pregnant, so it's all
Mhm.
still weird, but not as bad
Yeah,
as it could have been. Okay,
yeah.
I'll be quiet now.
Um, again, are there any other episodes specifically you wanted to kinda talk about?
The only one I want to talk about, we have a 0.75 difference. It's the nanny and the hunk producer.
Mhm.
The only reason I want to mention it is because we get this revelation. So this is the episode where Maxwell wins a number of Tony Awards. And then the media pays attention to him. They see Fran, and some tabloid writes an article about how, the nanny and the hunk producer, and then another one about the producer who can't keep his pants on, basically alleging that Fran and Maxwell had been having an affair since before his wife died, even on their honeymoon. Um,
Mhm.
and Maggie finds out about it, and she gets very upset. And there's this revelation when Fran is trying to convince Maggie, like, this is like, how could you think I did such a thing? And Maggie makes the comment that it's just so obvious that dad is in love with you. So, like,
Mhm.
I just want to highlight that as a high point because it seemed clear to everyone around them that Maxwell loves Fran and that Fran,
Mhm.
also that Fran loves Maxwell, but, he's the one who we really got to push down the aisle.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, and for clarification for our lovely listeners, so Debbie gave that episode a 4.5 and I gave it a 3.75. And again, I think my major like issue with the episode was just like Maggie believing it in the first place when it didn't make any like sense, right? I know there's this like, oh, well, it was in a tabloid and like people kind of sometimes just believe whatever they see without thinking too much into it.
Right. Even
Um,
Fran says that only an idiot would believe it. Of course, in runs Sylvia. You were having an affair while he was not married, and you still only
yeah,
make $6 an
yeah.
hour or whatever.
hmm So I think that was like my primary issue, but yeah, you make the good point. Like it's nice to be like confirmation that other people see.
Correct. I
Yeah.
mean, whenever we have like actual movement forward, like that's usually in my book a good thing, unless of
hmm
course Maxwell, takes it back. Um,
Yeah.
I don't care for that, and clearly neither did Fran.
hmm
Um, so yeah, I think those are the high and the low points. Are there any others you want to talk about?
Not particularly.
All right, so I made a list of new characters that I'm curious your thoughts on.
Okay.
So the first one is Maxwell's father. And in fairness, the second one is Joan Sheffield, Maxwell's stepmother. We met them
hmm
in the episode Me and Mrs. Joan, where Fran and Maxwell are walking and they see his father in this art gallery, and then he kisses her to try to avoid his dad, but his dad talks to him anyway. She invites them over, and it's awkward, and we learn a lot about I think James Sheffield. We learn that he would marry his help. He made an honest woman out of his secretary all those years later.
hmm
Um, what do you make of them? What do you think of them?
I don't believe I was a fan of them,
Fair.
like even in that episode, because okay, what was the name of that
Me and
episode
Mrs.
again?
Joan. You gave it a
Yeah.
4. I gave it a four
You
and a
gave
half.
it a 4. You gave it 4. Yeah, yeah. And I think they probably were part of the reason I didn't give it as high as you did. Just
Fair.
because like dad was a jerk.
Dad was a
Um,
jerk.
just straight up a jerk. Um, yeah, I can understand making that point of like the differences he actually married the helps, but I think there's even kind of and correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm misremembering. But, like, there's that kind of confrontation at the end, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Between Maxwell and his father,
Correct.
um, and
It,
'cause
it,
at
that was about the money. So at dinner, Fran had
mhm,
also invited her mom and grandma, so Sylvia and Yetta,
mhm,
and James gave them a stock tip to triple their return, triple their money,
mhm.
and
Yeah,
then it went kabuts.
yeah,
But
and he was so dismissive of that, like, he didn't care,
they lost what,
um
$30,000, 60,000, however much. And he's like, "Oh, just be glad that's all you lost." And she's like, "That's our life savings."
he has, like, no concept of, like, the common like, regular people,
Correct.
um, and again, no empathy,
Correct.
and Maxwell's, like, trying to be, like making the point of like, no, like this is their life saving, like he's trying to kind of stand up for the Fine family and
Correct.
trying to show his father that this was wrong, and his father's not that receptive to it.
His father's not at
So,
all receptive to it.
nope.
You want to play that
And
game?
yeah, it's true. And like, Yeah, so I'm not a fan.
Okay, I didn't think so. I'm not a fan either. How about Dr. Miller?
So he's been a recurring, um, character. Obviously, it's there's a little bit of inconsistency, I
Mm-hmm.
think, because especially the first couple of times she went, he would always talk about like, oh, like ordering all these like different things,
Mm-hmm.
with the money and all that kind of stuff. And then, but towards the end, and so he seems like he's like stereotypically like um well off or like upper crust or like I don't know. And then towards the end they kind of emphasize more like again him picking his nose, him answering the bathroom in his bathroom, the telephone in
Answering the
his
phone in his
bathroom,
bathroom, yeah. Now,
and like
in fairness, that one was at like 5:30 in the morning when Fran called him in the middle of
yeah,
the night.
but then like the reveal that he lives with his mom?
Correct.
Question mark.
Yes.
Now, I'm gonna say, like, there's not anything necessarily wrong with, like, people living with their parents or whatever, but the way they presented it was, like, kind of, uh, infantile.
They were making a joke out of it because he was telling
Yeah,
Fran it's a long and painful process to separating from
yeah,
one's mother. At which point his
yeah,
mother knocked on the bathroom door.
yeah, and so, like, but yeah, so there's, like I would say there was kind of an inconsistency then with his character.
That's fair.
I
Also, he had previously referenced his wife.
Mhm.
Or
Yeah,
actually, I take that back. That might actually that's probably next season. Where I'm just double checking. Yeah, minor spoiler. Um, when a couple, I will not say who, goes to him for couples counseling, he asks them to say what brought you two together originally, and he says, "My wife says it's my winning smile" or something like that.
mhm,
I won't say what couple it is. It's not who you think. That's all I'll say.
yeah, yeah. So, like, again, um like, overall with his character, I personally could kinda take it or leave it,
Okay,
um, in
fair.
terms of, like, the scenes and different things with him. Like, I understand, like, the purpose of it, but, like, in terms of, like, again, having an outlet for Fran to talk about her relationship with Maxwell, um, but it's not like he's, like, a favorite character of mine or anything. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean he's there. He does what he needs to, and then he's gone.
Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, I mean he's just kind of funny. He's not exactly what I imagine a good therapist is.
Mhm,
Seems a bit money grubbing for my liking.
mhm,
I don't care for. Um, yeah,
mhm. Yeah,
I mean, he does, as I said, he is going to help, but there's only so far he can move Fran.
mhm. Yeah.
Okay, so I've got two other somewhat minor characters. What about Chandler? I think that was his name. The guy who Cece was seeing. It's
Mhm.
like two
Like, for those,
episodes.
like, 2 episodes?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, again, I don't think we really truly get to know him himself. It's primarily his role as to what happens between Cece and Niles, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, like, I appreciate the fact that him going after her led to some great, scenes of Niles missing Cece and all that kinda stuff. Um, again, uh since it was just those 2 episodes, and we don't really see him much when they break up. It's
Yeah.
more like Cece telling us, like
Well, I was going to ask, what did you think of how he broke up with her?
yeah, it's interesting because again, from our perspective, like, there's an inconsistency with him because he was the one who was pursuing her at first, right? He's the
Mm-hmm.
one who shows up on a Saturday night with a contract as
Correct.
a pretext for seeing her,
Correct.
and now suddenly, like she's too clingy and he's done with her. So like we didn't get to see that interaction. What the interactions we saw between them two, like the two of them, is when he comes to see her at Maxwell's residence in the first place to ask her out,
Hmm.
and then at the dinner
Correct.
where they were very like kind of lovey-dovey, right?
Correct.
And then we don't actually see any of like the breakdown of the relationship. It's just heard secondhand, or like we don't see it happen.
Correct. We see the letter that was shoved
Mhm.
into the mailbox, which contained Cece's key because she
Mhm.
was smothering him. She called him 40 times a day, waited on him hand and foot, uh, called to make sure he was eating well and drinking right, and blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
In fairness, she did seem a little overbearing.
Yeah, but it also uh,
It
seemed a bit
escalated
out of
too fast.
well, it seemed like out of character for Cece as well, in terms of like she's not that considerate of others. Not
Correct.
to say she couldn't turn into that, but again, I don't think we saw enough of it happening, if
I
that makes
agree. No,
sense.
I agree. All right, the last minor character I'm asking about is Fred the pharmacist. What do you think of him?
Fred the pharmacist.
We see him in the episode The Facts of Lice when Fran
Mhm.
and Val go to the pharmacy to pick up the special shampoo, and
Mhm.
he announces over the loudspeaker that Fran Fine is here to pick up her lice shampoo, and then he starts
Yeah.
reading the bottle with the intercom on, the PA
Mhm.
system on.
Yeah. From if you can't tell, he didn't leave much of an impression on
I
me.
see that. I see that, but that's okay. It'll become clear why I asked about him later.
Okay. But yeah, so that's it.
Yeah, that's all I got.
Okay. Okay.
I knew the characters going in, so my opinions are already formatted. Um,
Well, I guess my question to you is, having watched this season through a more critical eye, have
uh-huh.
any of your opinions shifted in the slightest?
Of the minor characters, no. Of the major characters, yes, but I will save that. I've got a few more things to talk about in our. I'll save my
Okay.
comments for later.
Okay.
Um, so I did want to ask you, did you have a favorite of Fran's suitors? And I put together a short list of possible contenders.
Okay.
Um, Attorney Jack, that's
Mhm.
uh, cousin Bob,
Mhm.
dancing dancing Fred. Why did I put? Oh, dancing Fred, not Fred the pharmacist. Uh,
There's so many Freds.
There's too many Freds. Um, Dancing Fred was Aunt Frida's multi-millionaire boyfriend. Nigel Sheffield, bank robber Leslie, and those were the options I put on my list.
Okay. So again, as we've established, not a fan of any other person, but of those listed, um like I found the
Jack,
attorney one. He was
Attorney
Jack.
Jack, played by
He was
Jason Alexander. For those who don't recall.
and he was his character was blind,
Mm-hmm.
but he was like a very like likable character, I think. Like he
Mm-hmm.
wasn't a jerk or anything like that. Um
He made a couple dirty jokes, but no, he wasn't a
yeah,
jerk.
but like overall, like but now if he wasn't her cousin, then
Correct.
cousin Bob
Correct.
would be
Correct.
perfect. But the fact that he's her cousin, like, just automatically disqualifies him.
Fair. Yeah, that's actually my opinion as well. If he
Yeah,
wasn't her cousin, he would have been perfect, and then Maxwell would have been, regretting that he took it back for the rest of his life.
yeah,
Um, followed
yeah,
followed by Nigel, the brother, because
okay.
like
'Cause
also
I'm
just
not a
throwing this
I'm
out
not
there.
a Nigel fan.
I know, but as Val puts it, he so like when Fran tells Val about it, Val's Val assumes it's Maxwell, and Fran's like, no, the brother, and Val's response is better, younger, no kids.
Mhm. But,
So
yeah, I've never been a Nigel fan even when we saw him in France.
okay,
Like, just yeah.
Okay.
I mean, again, to each her own, but but yeah, as for the others listed, I don't think they're even remotely, you know.
The only other one I think worth commenting on is Dancing Fred, just because it's so funny. Like everyone's convinced he's in love with Frida, but he's too afraid to make his move, and then he doesn't do it because he can't dance. So Fran tries to teach him. Then he has a heart attack in her bed.
Mhm.
Um, and then like everything's fine. They're getting married, and on the day of his wedding, he's like, "Oh no, Fran, I think I'm in love with you." Like
Mhm.
she could have been a very, very wealthy woman. Just saying.
Yeah, but again,
I mean,
for me, yeah.
by that same token, the bank robber. If she'd married the bank robber, she also would have been a very wealthy woman.
Except that he got caught.
Yeah, well, if she had really been interested in him, perhaps Sylvia would have not gone with them. Maybe she could have convinced Sylvia to not go with them. Anyway, these
Yeah.
are these are hypotheticals that don't matter.
Yeah. And
Um,
again, I don't necessarily like think just for clarification's sake, like I don't think she would have ended up or should have ended up with the lawyer. I'm just saying
mhm,
like he's a non-offensive character, if that makes
mhm,
sense. But again, like cousin Bob, if he was not her cousin, I think would be the ultimate
correct. No,
match.
I'm 100% in agreement with you. He would have been the obvious choice if he was not her cousin.
Yes.
Which is again why she concluded the morning after their date, I've just met the man I'm going to marry.
Yeah.
He's funny, he's cute, he's a doctor. Um, you know, his as he points out, his mother's dead. He wants kids someday. He's the total package that Fran is looking for, except for the
Mhm.
fact that he's her cousin.
Yeah, and not Maxwell Sheffield.
Well, when a guy tells you that he loves you and then takes it back, you're allowed to
Yeah.
look at other options.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about character development.
Mhm.
This is kind of so when you ask me watching it with a more critical eye, did it change my view of anyone? I'm not gonna lie, watching this with a critical eye makes me kind of hate Maxwell. Like,
Mm.
I love him. He's dreamy. He's Maxwell Sheffield. He's the man of everyone's dreams, obviously. But he's
Mhm.
kind of manipulative and kind of a jerk to
Mhm.
Fran. He's not there
Yeah.
when she needs him. And like, he just gives her just enough to keep her holding on.
Yeah.
Just enough to make it
Spectrum.
seem like, yeah. And I don't,
Yeah.
watching it with a critical eye, I don't like that. I
Yeah.
don't like that. It's not healthy. It is a bad relationship to try to emulate. Guys,
Mhm.
seriously, don't try to emulate this relationship in your real life. You will be unhappy.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and that's like one of those things I believe in reference to Maxwell. Um, I had discussed in a previous episode of like, okay, this only really works because this is fiction, and
correct.
we're familiar with the tropes and the expectations of the genre, right? Um, but it's like some of his behaviors are red flags in real
Mm-hmm.
life, right? Again,
Mm-hmm.
as you mentioned, this is not a healthy kind of relationship to emulate in real life. Again, a lot of it has to do with like how like the tropes and like the expectations and they have to drag things out, right? Um, when it comes to the story. But yeah, you don't want to actually be with someone like that in real life because as you mentioned, not healthy, you won't be happy. In real life, unfortunately, there's no guarantee of a happily ever after or character growth or what have you.
Correct.
So, yeah, it's definitely there are several points in the season where we saw a darker um, side of Maxwell where he was just more of a jerk and displayed red flags.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I don't have anything else to say that won't go into a different shtick. But yeah, I
Okay.
mean that's the big thing that like watching
Yeah.
this with a critical eye, I don't I don't like the pattern that they've fallen into. I
Yeah.
don't think it's not healthy. I don't like how Maxwell treats her. I don't like that she has low, like her self-esteem is that low that she's willing to put up with it.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. Okay, I'm done. Um,
Okay.
do you have any predictions for season 5?
Again, hopefully, again, more progress in the relationship between Fran and Maxwell.
Do you think
Um,
it's going to be a straight line? Like,
oh no,
okay,
not in the sitcom romance genre.
okay, just want to make sure. Want
Yeah.
to make sure.
But I would expect that there would be more progress
Hmm.
than this past season.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, that's my prediction on that front. And then, I mean, I'm curious if there's gonna be any more interactions between Cece and Niles. Like, I wouldn't expect them to like necessarily get together, but I'd be curious if there's additional kind of scenes like we've seen this past season of them like showing moments of like care, concern, and vulnerability towards each other.
Hmm.
So, so yeah.
Um, okay, good. I'm not going to confirm or deny anything.
Okay.
All right,
You'll
so
just have to keep listening to us.
exactly. Or I mean, I guess you could watch the show yourself, but we're way more engaging than just watching it by yourself.
Hmm.
Um, so I guess let's talk about some fashion, our
Hmm.
favorite fashion. So according to our friends at the Wardrobe Files, Fran wore 137 outfits during season 4. That included 44 matching sets, 43 animal prints, 85 skirt suits, 38 layered vests, and 17 combinations of sweaters and mini skirts.
Hmm.
I'll note from watching the Wardrobe Files compilation, this did not include her travel attire in the first episode of season 3, didn't include some of her bathrobes, and it double counted the white and black dress that she wore in both California and Florida.
Hmm.
Um, it also interestingly included some, but not all of the fantasy attire. So, like, I can think of, I think, 3 different episodes where we're in someone's head imagining like what would be. It did count the Fran's dynasty dress from the episode Kissing Cousins, but it didn't include her, mock wedding dress, or I also don't think it included what she was wearing in Niles' like dream while he's like medicated in the hospital. So
Hmm.
I just want to mention that. Um,
You're so observant, Debbie.
just
That's
imagine
good.
how much smarter I would be if my brain was not full of nanny trivia. Um, all right. So I also, from reviewing our friends at the Wardrobe Files compilation, I did put together a list of iconic looks, things I liked, so my favorite fashion and my least favorite fashion.
Hmm.
Um, do you want me to go through these, or do you want to chime in with anything, any any attire that you recall?
So I would say, like, just personally, because I definitely want to give you the space to talk about all of the particulars. Just a general kind of overview. If I recall, there were more times than not this season where we both were like, didn't really have a favorite from this
Yeah,
episode.
yeah,
Generally, there was a lot more of her fashion kind of harkening back to like 60s, 70s or whatever.
agreed.
Her hairstyles like changed a bunch. Um, so it's one of those things that like offhand, like off the top of my head, I don't have that many like iconic outfits as I did in previous seasons. Now when you start talking about it, it might like, you know, uh remind me of something, but like just as a general thinking about the season as a whole. Um, I think generally speaking, there are fewer outfits that were like, or episodes that were like, oh, I had a favorite. But I will let you take over as to particulars.
Okay. And thank you for pointing out what she does with her hair, because that is something that we've noticed repeatedly this season, that she doesn't have her stereotypical traditional Fran Fine do.
Hmm.
Um,
And it would change often, even in a single episode.
correct, which seems like a lot. Also, not just that her hair changed, but she's like wearing different wigs.
Hmm.
Um, So, all right. So, I'll start with the iconic outfits. And now, of course, if my description does not tell me what it is, then it clearly was not that iconic. Um,
Mhm.
so, um, yeah, okay. So in the episode, um, me and Mrs. Joan. So in that episode, Joan told Fran how she got Maxwell's dad to finally make his move. And she said that she went in wearing a short little crop top and short little skirt, I think, to change his typewriter ribbon. And Fran's like, "Oh, I work with children. I can't dress like that." Turn around and she's wearing, yellow, like dusty yellow patterned pants with a short sleeved black crop top. And she walks in, she's like, "I'm here to change your typewriter ribbon. Your ribbon, where's your typewriter?" And to me, that's
Mhm.
an iconic look, especially because in that scene, Maxwell sort of talks himself into the whole idea, like, well, maybe it's okay to live for my own happiness. And they make out. And then, of course, all hell breaks loose. So that
Mhm.
I thought was iconic. Um, in the episode, in Affair to Dismember, Fran's long pink coat over the black turtleneck and shorts that she wore to meet Nigel, to try to meet him at the QE2. To me, that was an iconic look and also kind of funny because she's like running around with a suitcase, the flowers he gave her, and an umbrella. So like,
Mhm.
anyway, um, the the orange, the like creamsicle orange with like red checkered halter top and pants, like the matching set that she wears in, is it Aruba? Or yeah, I think it's Aruba where they go in the episode Tattoo, where she and Maxwell, she's planning to, show him her hidden tattoo, which is on her butt somewhere. So she's really skimpy bikini, but she ends up not changing into that because Gracie had convinced her that it didn't make sense to take a swim at that point. So she wears this with the, slick hair and the matching hairband while they're playing ping pong. I thought that was iconic. Fran's purple bridesmaid dress in Kissing Cousins. It's like really super 90s, super over the top. It's a big hoop skirt. It's like a pale purple with frill. To me, that's just totally iconic, and I can picture it exactly. And then the last one I'll mention is um, the black suit. She's wearing a black jacket with skirt that had big red and white polka dots. And I think in some of the promotional materials for the nanny, she was wearing that. That's from the episode Samson He Denied Her. So those were the iconic ones. Do you want to comment on any of those, or shall I talk about my favorite things and then my least favorite things?
Go ahead and talk about your favorite things.
Okay, so kind of to your point where you mentioned that there's a lot of like 1960s throwbacks. Um, she wears the same 1960s pattern first on a dress and then like a one of her like tank dresses and then on a long sleeve shirt. It's a white background with like colored dots and designs. I really like that. Also sort of feels iconic, especially because she wears it in two different ways in this season. Um,
Mhm.
I really like the black and white striped outfit she was wearing when she got fired from the Rosie show. It's like a black shirt with like white stripe, um, vertical white stripes. Um, and then finally, oh, Fran's black dress with the colored hearts. The dress she wears in the episode The Fifth Wheel when she goes to meet Cece and her boyfriend and Val and her boyfriend. She's wearing this like, it's like a black and white dress that then has like these blue, red, and green, I think, hearts on the front. And to me, that's also a very iconic dress. I have a dress that's in a similar, you know, design, and I always refer to it as my Fran Fine dress because it makes me
Mhm.
think of her. All
Mhm.
right. Then finally, in the category of things I did not like, um, I did not like her leopard print, almost bathing suit esque, like bra type shirt with matching skirt and Hurricane Fran. That's what she's wearing. Like when they get to the island, don't care for that. Looks it looks cheap and tawdry. Don't like that. Um,
Mhm.
I did not like her brick patterned pantsuit that she wears in Facts of Lice. Um, and then the last two I really didn't like. What Fran wore to the Tony Awards. She's wearing this like silver
Yeah.
sequined skater dress with the
Yeah.
white short bob wig.
Yeah, you and I both had a conversation in that episode of how, like, it just did not seem, like, appropriate for the event.
Correct. And it also was not particularly flattering.
Yeah.
And then the last one, also, I think we had a conversation about this and how it was not appropriate for the event. Fran's like periwinkle midriff showing like outfit that she wore to the auction in You Bet Your Life. She had
Mhm.
like it was like kind of like a sports bra top, but a little bit longer. She had a matching like shawl and then like a skirt. It just everyone like the guys were all wearing tuxedos. It just seemed way too informal. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, I didn't care for that. All right, I'm done. I said
Okay.
enough.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for putting up with me. How about some notable New Yorkers this season? We've already talked about Jason Alexander, Bette Midler, Rosie O'Donnell. Those are the ones who like spring to mind. Were there any other notable New
Jon
Yorkers?
Stewart.
Jon Stewart, of course. We've already also talked about him. How could I forget Cousin Bob?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. Those are the ones that, like, immediately come to mind in terms of the season. It's interesting, though, because I think let me pull up our spreadsheet to, like, double check. I think it's continued the pattern from previous seasons that, generally speaking, not in every single case, I tend not to like those episodes, as much. Like, Jay Leno was in it as well, right?
Mm-hmm. He was in
And
The Taxman Cometh.
yeah, and that's one, I gave it a 3. The Rosie Show, I gave a 3.5. Um, what was the name of the episode? Oh, well, duh, You Bet Your Life.
Yeah.
I gave it a 3.5. Um, again, even Kissing Cousins, I gave it a 3.5. I'm sensing a subconscious pattern.
Well, the Heather Biblos story, you gave it a 4. That had
Yeah,
Pamela Anderson.
Heather Lo oh, sorry, Pamela Anderson, yeah. Um, but yeah, like,
Fair.
it's just interesting to me, I guess.
That is really interesting. It's like subconsciously, it
Someone
detracts.
else is trying to steal the show.
Correct, and it detracts from your enjoyment of the show.
Yeah, and, like, I guess because sometimes too, like, the characters are just so, like, outrageous or don't quite fit or, like, I don't know. Again, I did like Jon Stewart, except he was her cousin, so
Yeah, the fatal flaw. The fatal flaw.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah,
What about you? Did you have a favorite?
I'm gonna go with Jon Stewart
Mhm.
again. If he wasn't her cousin,
Mhm.
it would have been perfect.
I think, like, lovely listeners, how many times do we say the phrase, "If only he wasn't our cousin?"
Too many. I could answer
Too
that too many times. Yeah. Okay. So, do you have anything else on notable New Yorkers?
I do not.
Okay, so then we're up to Yiddish Cop. I will unsurprisingly point out to everyone that there are constant violations of kashrut, which is really annoying when you're watching this with a critical eye. So there's that. The other thing I want to point out that we did already have the most Jewish episode, which was the Passover story. I remember for that one I had to like organize the Yiddish into categories because there was so much of it, and
Mhm.
that was really fun. Yeah. How about 90s nostalgia? Which, like, looking back on the entire season, are there any episodes that, you know, thinking about them holistically, we want to point out again would not have happened in this day and age?
Yeah, a lot of them, like, a lot of plot lines could easily be resolved or, like, not happen in the first place in this day and age. I'm trying to hone into specifics. Um, does I guess let me throw it to you first. Is there anything that immediately comes to mind for you?
Yeah, so the kissing cousins thing that we've been talking about, like
Yeah.
on social media, she would have found out he was
Oh
her
yeah.
cousin.
Yeah, for sure.
The
Um,
other one is an affair to dismember. It feels dated that like she couldn't figure out like if she really wanted to get on the boat, like how could she not have figured that out?
mhm.
That plus also it feels very dated that Maxwell had like no conception whatsoever of what was going on between his brother and his nanny slash the woman
Mhm.
he loves. He just felt dated. Like I feel like in this day and age, there would have been pictures on social media and like someone would have seen them and been like, Maxwell, are you paying attention to this? Like, anyway,
Mhm. Yeah. Like, I really wish I could say cradle robbers wouldn't happen today. Um,
it would.
it would. It would. We've had, like, other series that, like, play into those type of relationships. Um, but yeah. Um, hmm. Yeah, I'm just trying to think if there's anything else that really comes to mind. Um, I don't know. Like, do you think Fran today would have gone out to the restaurant as the fifth wheel? Like,
I can imagine a
maybe?
situation where she would, and it would happen in the exact same way. Some schmagegi would give her bad advice and encourage her to go get out there and go. And then she
Oh,
would do it and then regret it immediately.
yeah. Okay. No muse is good muse. With like how social media is these days, I feel like probably it wouldn't have been the same kind of thing where she's like actually physically going around with the singer as a muse, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I don't really have much more on that.
Okay. Okay. So I guess the only other question in 90s nostalgia is does the series feel dated?
Occasionally.
Yeah, I
Um,
think that's right.
yeah, and again, though, like there are timeless kind of like tropes and stuff like that, certain expectations, but yeah, I mean, definitely sometimes just like the fashion is very 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Sometimes again, just the situation, you're like, you would have a cell phone these days. Like that
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't happen. But yeah.
I agree. I agree.
Mhm.
So then I think we're uh do we want to do ratings or future fun next? I mean, we usually
Um,
do future fun next, so
yeah,
we'll stick with
go
that.
ahead.
Okay. So we've got two more seasons to go, guys. Um, yay. Okay, so a few different things I want to point out. One, we are going to have another Jewish themed episode coming up in season 6. That's called the Hanukkah story. I won't tell you anything about it other than there is a Hanukkah miracle. Um, we are going to meet an additional relative of Maxwell's next season, and it's one that he didn't even know existed until his father died because his father's going to die. Um, Fran does stop seeing Dr. Miller in season 5. Fred the pharmacist, the reason I was asking about him is he comes back in seasons 5 and 6.
Huh.
So that's why I was asking about him. We will also see Nigel again. And guess what? His, shall we say, affair with Fran does not stay under wraps very long. So there's that. And it's an inopportune time. Um, and then finally, and probably most importantly, Fran and Maxwell's relationship is going to have additional ups, downs, and bumps in the road. Next season, they're going to go on a first and a second date. I'm also happy to report that season 5 is going to end on a very high note. I won't tell you what it is. Um, but season 6 opens with some ridiculousness before transitioning into some seriousness and a brand new adventure for the entire Sheffield household at the end of the season, or the end of the series, I should say. So, yeah, that's our future fun.
Yay. exciting.
Yeah, we have a lot of fun to look forward to still.
Hmm.
All right, so turning to episode ratings, as our lovely listeners know, we rate each episode on a range of 1 to 5 lipsticks. Our current averages are Bernadette gave an average rating of 3.78, and I gave an average rating of 3.85. So we
Hmm.
were pretty close, but I'm still above you.
Yeah, but also like compared to like last season.
Lower,
Yes, because last season you gave it overall 4.4
4.4. Yep.
and mine was 4.21.
Yeah.
Um, and so like looking at it, yeah, so far season 2 you gave it a 4.12, I gave it 4.03, and season 1, I guess this is closest to season 1 then. Cuz season 1 was 3.81 for you and 3.81 for me. Um, but yeah, so we've kind of
3.82 for
overall
me. Hold
taken.
on. 3.82 because I was always higher, just slightly.
Okay,
We need
fine.
to be clear about that.
Okay.
Continue. Yes, you're right. This is much closer to season 1 than 2 or 3.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, are there any episodes you want to re-rate?
No,
Mhm.
no. How about
Yeah.
you?
No, there's not really any that like stick out as much as in some previous seasons, where I like felt very strongly about re-rating it later on. I
Hmm.
don't really have that in this um
Yeah.
season.
Um, so actually that's kind of funny is I have a note in my like script for today that I wanted to mark tattoo at 4.5, but it already says 4.5. So I don't know why I noted that. Maybe I wanted to make it a 5. I don't, but like looking at it now, I'm just like, 4.5 is fine.
Yeah. I feel like this season, generally speaking, doesn't necessarily it's not as like we're not as passionate? I don't know how to say it. It
We're
doesn't.
we're less we're less enthused, I think is the way to put it.
Mhm. Yeah. That's a good way to say it.
And I kind of felt that like as we've been going through this season, like as we've gotten to the ratings every time, I've just been like, eh. From almost every episode, I've been like, eh. There are very few that I
Mhm.
was like, this is definitely a 5. This is a
Yeah.
great episode. I love this
And
episode. It's me.
yeah, I didn't even realize until till today that I never gave a 5 this season. Like I didn't realize that. So, yeah. So, but we have things to look forward to.
We do. We do. Um, yeah. So, I mean, I think, yeah, I think we've covered everything on that point. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
Oh, I don't believe so. How about you?
I think I'm good. All right.
Okay.
Well, that's all we have for you today. We hope you had a fine time with us as we revisited The Nanny. Join us next time when we'll pick up back with our regular scheduled podcast and discuss episode 102, The Morning After.
If you'd like to reach us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Nanny Revisited. You can also send us email at a fine time sorry, a fine time nanny revisited at gmail.com. Have a great week.